Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a 30 seconds or so just to let people have time to jump online and join us. So making sure you can hear us and you know you're not on mute if you're not hearing any activity just now. Brilliant. Well, we might start now. Well, hello and welcome. On behalf of Witwa, my name is Pia Turchnoff. I'm Chair of Women in Technology. Most of you I've had the pleasure of meeting before, so thank you. Thank you for giving up your Sunday afternoon, jumping online and joining us for a bit of a conversation, which we'll hope you'll take a lot away with and really get some meaningful advice around our award submissions that we are running at the moment. Before we start, what I'd like to do is just take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and honour their elders past, present and emerging, recognising the strength, resilience and the capacity of Noongar people in this land. A very warm welcome to our wonderful panellists and speakers who are joining us today. Many of these will be familiar faces, I hope. If not, then you're in for a real treat as well, just getting to hear some new voices. We have with us Sarah Mitchell, Jo Saunders, Heidi Pass, Michelle Radley and Stene. And I will introduce them in a little bit more detail in a moment. Today's all about our awards. Hopefully you've heard about them. You know about them. You may have even submitted last year and come back for another go at the award nomination. We've got some wonderful supporters and companies supporting us this year, including Valrose, who are very generously sponsoring our new award, which is the Outstanding Diversity Advocate Award, as well as having AppBot, Journey One as award sponsors. And today, of course, would not be possible, and with the support around the awards as well, Cyber CX and the Women in Cyber. You all know that Witwa is a not-for-profit volunteer-led organisation, so we genuinely can't do it without this support. Thank you very much. And if you're sitting in and listening in today from any one of those organisations, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for your continued support. Now, you know that Witwa, we are all about empowering you. We're all about empowering women and changing the dial around the diversity and equality conversation. You will have been tapped on the shoulder for an award submission, I suspect. If you're sitting in today listening to this, you may be halfway through writing a submission. You may not have started yet, or you might simply be saying, I don't know why I was nominated. What am I meant to do? And am I really the right person to be nominating for this award? Let me start off by first of all saying, remember that Witwa is Witwa Tech Plus, and these awards are Tech Plus. That means that you don't have to be a technical expert, a software engineer, a coder, a programmer in order to fit the criteria. We are looking for the broader role models in the industry and in surrounding industries. So as you know, we're talking about the curators and the moderators and users of technology just as much as those core technicians that create the technology that we're using. So please don't let that be that first hurdle where you are opting out of the awards simply because you think your job title doesn't fit what we're looking for. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. We've got a great packet of resources that we've put together for you that you can take beyond today's conversation. A link to these resources would have been included in your registration reminder this afternoon. And a massive shout out and thank you to Caitlin, who spent the last few days putting these resources together with the support and help with Gree as well. There are links there to a couple of blogs and written articles that may help you get started and perhaps give you a little bit more confidence about why you should be submitting a nomination. But more importantly, and most importantly, is probably the download our working booklet. That working booklet will actually have in it not only the links, a few tips and tricks, but also more importantly, a template of the award submission. And this afternoon, we'll be walking through those 3 key criteria that we've asked you to address. So my call to you would be multitask right about now. download the working booklet if you haven't already, print it out next to you, or simply grab a blank piece of paper and a pen, and make sure that as you're listening to our wonderful panelists and as we talk about each particular question, that you actually jot down some notes and perhaps start filling in each answer to the 3 questions through your own lens, so that by the end of today, you hopefully will end up with an 80% complete application form that you then only have to polish and submit in time, as opposed to starting from scratch. So before we get started, and what we'll do as a broad overview, we've invited Sarah Mitchell along to join us and share some of her insights with us. If you haven't met Sarah before, she's a content marketing expert. She's the founder of a business called Typeset, and she's a global copywriter as well. She's published in over 5 continents, is an expert in how to write applications, but also has been a judge, and as such understands what judges are looking for when they actually review these applications. She's also a multiple award winner in the marketing sphere. So really, who better to lead us in this conversation than Sarah? And I know your original home is far, far away, but I bet you're really happy right about now that Perth is home. I'm going to hand over to Sarah. She's got some wonderful slides to share with us. So for the first few minutes now, sit back, relax, and just listen to what Sarah has to share. Thank you very much, Sarah. Over to you for a moment.
Thanks, Pia. And I mean, I've for a long time felt like this was the best place in the world, but really more so than ever before. So I'm sitting on my porch in gloomy Fremantle, but there's a massive home decorating project going on, and I've shut out the yelling and the dogs barking and everything else. But the reason I wanted to talk to you today, and I'm so glad, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, is I've worked for a long time with the Content Marketing Institute to judge their global awards program. And every year, and we've just finished judging on Friday, every year there are people that should win that don't. And it's not because of the work that they've done or the work they've submitted, it's how they've submitted it. So what I want to do today, and I'm just going to spend about 10 minutes, is to give you some really quick tips from a judge's perspective on what you need to do to get yourself in the winning. So if we just go to the next screen, I can, I've got them written down.
Thank you. And Sarah, just if I could interject for 1 minute and just remind the audience that as they're listening to you, and if they've got questions that come to mind, please pop them into the Q&A box, not the chat box. Send us your questions through, and then we can touch on them when Sarah's finished with her presentation.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll be available if anybody wants to get in touch with me with specific questions about anything, that's fine too. Now, I want to just articulate, I am not a judge for this award. So this is in general for any kind of judging, if it's the business news, if it's the Chamber of Minerals and Energy, if it's the WITWA, these are just going to be kind of life skills that I want to impart. So the very first thing that happens is, and I always say, don't be that submission. Don't be the people that start it the night before that it's due. The longer that you give yourself to work on this and to refine it, the more successful you're going to be. And it does come through. Judges can tell when things have been rushed. So give yourself plenty of time. This is a feather in your career cap. So why wouldn't you spend a little bit of extra time? The other thing is you need to follow the instructions to the letter. So if they ask for a word count, you stick to that word count. If they ask you to speak in first person, in first person. If they want information from things that happened only in the last year, don't include anything else. So just be very pedantic about following the rules. And this next one, I've got a technology background, and we love nothing more than 3-letter acronyms. Read the question, answer the question. So often when in creative writing and at university and in different, interviews, they say, if you don't like the question that you've been given, turn it around and answer the question that you want to answer. Well, you can't do that in judging for an awards. If they ask you something, you have to answer the question. And what I just end up almost in tears sometimes at what I see is really wonderful work, but they veered off topic. They didn't answer the question that was asked. They didn't provide the information that I need as a judge, because the only thing that the judge has in front of them is the submission. So if it's not on the submission, if you've missed a question, if the answer is weighted, you can take yourself out of the running with just one simple omission. So please make sure that you read the question, answer the question. And as I said, don't veer off point. And it's really, if you've ever filled this one out before, you'll know it's brutal. A word count is really hard. You have to get a lot of information packed into a very few number of words. And all the good awards are like this. So don't veer off point. Don't waste any of your capital, writing capital in wandering. The other thing that I want to say is sometimes it's really hard to talk about yourself. It's really hard to write about yourself. Anybody that's ever written a biography knows, you know, even if it's a short 100-word bio, it's difficult to even to do your LinkedIn profile, which Joe will talk about. Ask your staff, ask your coworkers, ask people in your network. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, what would you say about me? Or what would you put on this? Or the person, if you were nominated, you know, why do you think I could win? But do not ask your mother, because your mother's going to think that you're wonderful and she's going to say yes, you know, to anything that you put down. So again, just get your team around you and ask for their opinion, because often I think the most brilliant things about people, they don't recognize in themselves. So what's really impressive to me, somebody will just say, oh, well, that's, you know, nobody cares about that. Well, yeah, or that's not that difficult. Well, it's not difficult for you because you're brilliant, but for the rest of us, that's really impressive. So involve people in your submission. And then I will always say this, it's an online form. Don't write it in the form, write it out in a Word document first, and give yourself that time. You never know what's going to happen. You never know if there's going to be a problem with saving. You don't know if you're going to run out of battery and your machine's going to crash and how that's going to impact it. Just always write offline, and then when it's all perfect, then all you do is copy and paste. Okay. So we want to, and then just in this next one, just really quickly, the secret to good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. This is a guy named William Zinsser. He wrote a little style guide called On Writing Well back in the 50s. It stands up today. One of the things that happens, I think, is we get into a situation where we're trying to describe things, we're trying to make things sound very official or very important, and we just put too much flour in it. So if we just want to go to the next screen, I've got this perfect cartoon that illustrates this. Tom Fishburne is a guy named the Marketunist. He does a blog in a cartoon. Now, poets and cartoonists are the best people there are for getting a lot of information across in a short amount. And cartoonists, for example, only have this one little frame. But this is what happens when people often either talk about themselves or talk about their company. We add a lot of extra gobbledygook in there that's not necessary, that doesn't tell anybody anything. It just, you know, and we see this a lot of times in technology companies where they start talking about flexible, scalable, innovative solutions. Well, that doesn't tell me anything, right? So get rid of, and the dad reading the brand story here, you know, he's just either going to scare people away or he's going to bore the kids. The other thing, and again, when you're stuck for a word count, there are a lot of words that you can just eliminate completely. So if you get to, and I always tell people, write long, and then you can edit, just, you know, blurt everything out, get everything on the page. And then if you're trying to condense things down into a word count, any of these words, you can, I will guarantee you, you can remove, and they won't change the meaning of your text at all. And they will also probably make, the removal of these words will make things a lot more punchy. So, you know, some is a very kind of, it's a weak word. It's kind of a, it's not really descriptive. Very, really, just, these are all things that they don't describe anything. That is the one word that I use all the time. That's my hit word. I think you can always take it out of your writing, and it's not going to do anything except reduce your word count and make your writing a lot punchier. So if you're having trouble getting down to the word count, go ahead and see if you can eliminate some of these words. Then the other thing I think is really important is to remember that this is really, and you can advance to the next screen now. This is a professional award, but the judges are human. And the easier and the more enjoyable that you make it to read for them, the more that they're going to remember the application or the submission. So while there's a lot of people that are going to compete, that we're competing against, and there's going to be a lot of submissions, if you can make it an enjoyable experience for the judge to read, you're going to be ahead of the pack. So the way that you can do that is you can work with an editor. Make sure an editor will help with logic and flow and make sure that it's structured well. Your spelling and your grammar should be absolutely perfect. There shouldn't be any question about that. And then always make sure that you proofread your entry. Get a couple of your friends to read it, or somebody on your team at work. If they don't understand what you're trying to get across, neither will the judge. And just as a last little kind of hack, if you don't have access to an editor, or if you're doing this on your own and you're not in a situation where you can share, before you submit, read it aloud. And when you're reading it out loud, you will automatically stumble over some of the words and the clutter, and that will be helpful too. So that is like, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to provide these slides so you can have these. If you need to get in touch with me, my details will be here for you to get to reach out to me, and feel free to send me an email or find me on LinkedIn. But take that little bit of extra time, start early, make it perfect. And I will guarantee you that a good award submission is something that you can use over and over again. There'll be a million times, or not a million times, but there will be dozens of times in your career where you need to put a biography forward, or you need to fill out an award or a tender or something. And if it's done well, you can use it and reuse it over and over.
Thank you, Sarah. That word, perfect. I guess, can we just shine a little bit of a spotlight on that for a moment? Because I know that's a trigger. It's a trigger word in many women's minds. So they go, oh, Sarah's just said I've got to write the perfect application. Well, that's me. I'm out. I can't do that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Elaborate a little bit around that difference, I guess, between a perfect nomination in the sense that it is grammatically correct, it doesn't have glaring errors, as opposed to the person being the perfect individual.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And so many people don't sign up to these things because they think that they're not perfect. What I'm talking about is make sure the spelling and the grammar is perfect. Make sure that it's, you don't want to use SMS text code in anything. You don't want to use shorthand. You want to make sure that you've got the sentence structure is good, that you've got complete sentences, that it's structured, and you've got it's well thought through. The older that I get, the more I realize that nothing is ever perfect, and you're never, I've been kind of chasing the same goals for a long time, and they just get further ahead. That doesn't mean that, that you're not worthy of an award. So yeah, that's a really good point. I just mean, make sure that your, the writing, the prose, the grammar is as perfect as possible.
That's right. I think if any of you dialed into our conversation with Julia Gillard earlier this week, there was that whole conversation piece around sometimes we need to get out of our own way, and we need to back ourselves, and we need to actually be brave enough to put our accomplishments and our value in writing and put it out there into that ecosystem. And I think there's lots of research that many women struggle to put in applications and to put themselves in the spotlight. But one thing that I'd love for everyone to take away today as well is there's also significant research that shows the value that winning awards has, or even being a finalist and being in that group of people. And let's just state the really obvious. With the Whitwer Awards, we've made it really simple. There's 3 questions for the actual award application, but there is actually no downside. There are people that walk away with a beautiful award, and we've got, the 5 award categories. There are the 20 award winners, but every single person nominated goes onto our role models page. And I think that is the real value, because collectively, and I know I've had many conversations with many of you and amongst each other, we talk about how do we get more women on boards, on committees, on panels, in the speaking arena and actually shine the spotlight on our many, many different capabilities. And one way to do that is to do it via the Whitwell Role Models page. And I can attest to the fact that we get calls and emails on a weekly basis where people go, I'm looking for something. And we go, well, have a look at the role models page. That's where you'll find them. And I can see Heidi smiling, and I know Grease had some opportunities like that. So there is no downside to submitting. There are only upsides. And I've also seen people included on their LinkedIn profiles as well as on their CV. So be brave, because there is no way to fail if you go down this path.
If I could just add to something there, Pia, one of my observations over the years has been that men are very quick to reach out for help, or even to outsource the writing of the submission to somebody in their department. Women take it on and think they have to do it all themselves. And I think that that's something, you know, just getting that help, if it's somebody on your staff, even if it's a proofreader, I think, you know, delegating some of the work is something that that a lot of successful people do.
Brilliant. Yeah, very good advice. And a great segue, I think, to Joe. So I'm going to be calling on Joe in a moment. Joe Saunders, if you're on LinkedIn, you should know Joe Saunders by now. I doubt that you've not been able to meet her in the virtual world. Joe is an absolute stellar LinkedIn and brand strategist. She's the founder of Wildfire Marketing, and really is a gun when it comes to the whole idea of how do you build that narrative and how do you build that own story around yourself in the LinkedIn world. But we thought there is only a small step to the left when we're talking about what that LinkedIn profile looks like versus what you put into an awards submission. Joe is ranked in the top 5 LinkedIn experts in the Asia Pacific region by the Social Media Marketing Institute. She was a finalist of the Social Media Educator of the Year Awards. Note how I'm actually calling out that she was a finalist. Didn't have to win in order for it to make the run sheet. And is also the author of the Get Good or Get Off, a guide to getting it right on social media. So Joe, I think you've got probably an absolute bucket load of tips and tricks that you could share. If we can just limit it perhaps to a few moments and give us the view through your lens on what you see are some of the great ways in which we can actually harness our unique value proposition when it comes to putting it in writing out there.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be asked, because I was one of those people that sort of sat on who am I to put myself out there for an award? And I was a role model. I actually like the term role model, because it's that whole, you know, if you can see her, you can be her, and, you know, lifting the industry together. So if you can put yourself out there, it's important. But whether you're writing your awards submission or you're writing about yourself in your LinkedIn profile, people don't enjoy it. I mean, who loves writing about themselves? It's difficult. So we either sit on the end, or, you know, the sort of spectrum where we don't sell ourselves at all, or we go the other way and we oversell ourselves in a way that doesn't really fit our brand and who we are, and we don't feel comfortable with it either way. So it's just finding that balance in between. But I think award submissions, when you stop and reflect where you are right now, I mean, there's some awesome people in this webinar, just looking at the names. Some people have achieved some brilliant things, but I think we often play ourselves down, and particularly females, I think. So it's really just stopping and reflecting on those achievements and taking a moment to just share, because it's not just about you, it's actually about other people as well. And it's about inspiring other people to step out. And last year, I know when I went through my nomination process, I shared a post, and I couldn't find it because, you know, there's a lot of content on my LinkedIn profile. But essentially, I was pretty much saying that if you don't back yourself, how can you expect anybody else to back yourself? And that's a really uncomfortable position, I think, to step into. But you know how hard you work. You know everything you've gone through to get to where you are now on your journey. So, you know, if you don't sort of step into that, you are selling yourself short, essentially. And sometimes it does take that moment for someone to tap you on the shoulder and say it's time to step up, and it's time to, you know, celebrate those little things. And I mean, a lot of the women I work with, I mean, I work with women and men, but it tends to be more women. I work with some women who are, you know, professional speakers and authors and on, you know, global stages, and they still feel that sense of imposter syndrome when it comes to LinkedIn particularly. And I guess that applies to awards in many cases. And that doubt about, should they be here? Are they qualified enough? And I think that whole being enough is something we need to just stop and think. We are who we are right now, and it's a journey. Where we are, where we've been, where we're going. It's a snapshot in time right now, and it's not about, like I said, it's not about winning. It's about being part of the voice, so that we're sort of rising. Now, what's that saying? I always get it wrong. Rising tides lift all boats. Is that the right one? It's something like that. But it's about, raising the bar of the industry and celebrating all the things that we've done. So, I could go off and talk about all sorts of things about LinkedIn and awards, but Pia, is there anything you specifically, any questions? Or
Yeah. Let's start at the beginning. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, well, where do I start? So would you say, look, grab your CV? Is that a starting point? Or is there a, sit down and write bullet points? How do you actually get that thought process happening?
Well, I would sit and, your CV's, I guess it depends how you work, but your CV's a nice, I guess, collection of things you've done. But then, like, whether I'm working, I obviously don't work on awards with people, but it's a similar process. But with LinkedIn profiles, it's not about your job description. It's about the achievements, the difference you made as a team, potentially, not necessarily just you, but you're part of a team. So if you can look at each role each role in the past or the current role you're in, and look for those that make that list. Well, what are the top 3 achievements? Pia, when you introduced me, there's some of my achievements. It's taken me a while to be able to own some of those things. The fact that I was a finalist in an award, I think that is a big thing. I didn't win, and that's okay. I was excited to be a finalist, and that's kind of cool. But it's just stopping and taking a moment to reflect on those things. And then depending on how you work, you could just brainstorm the things that you've achieved and, put them on Post-it notes and reorganize them. I've got a jar, which I call my fabulosity jar, and I got from one of my mentors. I love the word fabulosity. And what I do is I capture those micro moments, because I do a lot of woohoos. I'm a positive, optimistic person, so I like to celebrate little things, and it's just a simple woohoo or a little happy dance in the seat. So those moments passes by really fast, and then we get stuck on the problem. So if and do this as a challenge this week as you're preparing your award, capture those little moments of little woohoos, little things where someone's given you some positive feedback, something great's happened, some little tiny thing, and then you can pull those together. And you might be looking for patterns, or there might be something that you thought was small that turned into something bigger. It might be the stepping stone. Just and I still remember in my early journey. 10 years ago, I did not speak on stage. I was a behind the scenes person. Some of you might, I think Sarah Mitchell knew me back then. I remember attending my first business event, and it was Women in Technology, and Sarah Mitchell was speaking about Twitter. I think I've still got the 1-page handout because it made a difference. But if you said to me back then, I would be on stages around the world speaking, have a book and all these sorts of things and be finalists, I would have thought, you're talking about a completely different person. But it's just stopping and taking moments to sort of just grow, because these are growth edges. One of my coaches call them, which I think is quite clever.
I think it's a really good point. It's not about nominating yourself when you've reached the end of the journey, but it is an iterative process. So we have a lot of role models that are a lot younger and a lot earlier in their careers. So really it's the whole spectrum. So if you're listening, don't then go, oh, well, Jo's already written a book and she's a world published, she's a world traveled speaker here. But you can celebrate your success where you are at this given moment. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to do more great stuff going forward.
You just collect them and put them into your jar of fabulosity, and it'll just keep growing and growing, and different, and it'll evolve into different things as well. Because
could you take the jar of fabulosity and ask your friends to add to that as well? Would that work? So if I could go to a friend, somebody that I trust and knows me well, or whether it's your partner or whoever, and sort of say, if you had to think of 3 top great things that you think about me in a professional sense, does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. You could do it broadly on say your Facebook page. I probably wouldn't do it on LinkedIn unless you've got a specific network, but I probably would ask them directly, people you trust, because you want to go to people that know you quite well, that know your brand, so that you can articulate it. Because I think sometimes when it comes to your personal brand and how you communicate, you might not have taken time to really work out what are your strengths? So ask other people and look for patterns, or look at your LinkedIn recommendations and look for the patterns in the, and mine often say down to earth, friendly. That's the way I train. And that's the way I want to be seen. I don't want to be seen as some polished, person, because that's certainly not me. And it's okay being who you are and just accepting who you are. And in terms of how you can put yourself out there, and I'm going to talk about LinkedIn specifically, but this applies to anything. I talk about there's a spectrum. You're either a lurker or you're a promoter. And people lurk as in they're consuming information. They never participate because they're too scared to say anything, to be judged. You've got fear of judgment, fear of all sorts of things. And then you've got the opposite end, which I call the promoter, which is the people who are constantly talking about themselves. Look at me, I'm here. Look at me, I've won this award, I've done this. And you know how you feel about when you read that sort of content. But I also admire people who do back themselves, but it's got to be written the right way and written about, not just about yourself, but about the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think a word that's often used in this space is authenticity. And it is about finding what works best for you. And really that's why we've asked a collection of our role models to join us today that come from different backgrounds, different experiences. And I'll address one quick question that's come through, and it's probably more an operational one, if you indulge me for a moment, Jo, which is, do I have to choose the award category? So let me just make it clear. The process of actually applying is simple. There's one application form. It is the same. You submit that by answering the 3 questions. We have 20 awards, which are our 20 in 20 core award group. And out of those, we then, based on a number of different methodologies, we have the People's Choice winner. That is by public vote, as the name suggests. That closes on the 7th of October. So it's not like you're ticking a box when you're submitting. You're simply submitting the one nomination form to be included in that group. Beyond that, it is then up to our judges and then to the public to decide which particular awards may come your way. So we've got the First Among Equals award. That's the highest scoring nominee. And if you've got any doubt about the judging process, we have a wonderful cohort of judges, and each nomination submission will be reviewed by a number of judges, and the mean score across that judging cohort is then applied, and that is the score by which we then rank the submissions. So it is a very egalitarian and very broad-based judging methodology, so we make sure that we have more than 2 or 3 people actually assessing it. So it takes a lot of the bias and perhaps even unconscious bias out of the conversation. We have our Outstanding Youth Role Model Award. For that one, you have to be at 25 years or under. Our Outstanding Regional Role Model Award, which is for the highest scoring nominee outside of Perth. So that's outside the metro postcode area. And the People's Choice Award winner, as I said, that goes out to public vote. So you don't have to worry about which part shall I apply for. Simply throw your hat in the ring and then leave the rest to our wonderful judges and to the public. So what I'd like to do now is really get into the nitty-gritty, and I will invite Jo and Sarah to be part of this conversation, because I think we can unpack a number of different pieces of their experience. But quickly to introduce to you who else is on the call, and they'll be very familiar Witwa faces, hopefully. We have Stene, who is on our Witwa Communications Committee. You might know her as a STEAM and diversity advocate. She's the founder of her own enterprise called STEAM Engine Global, and is also a past Tech Plus Award winner before joining the Witwa Committee ranks. And I should say that anyone that's on the Witwa Committee nowadays can't be nominated for an award. Michelle Radley, welcome. Michelle's been with us for a while. It also sits on the Witwa Committee as part of our conference lead as well. She's a technology integrator and leader, and has been a past Tech Plus Award winner in 2018. So has walked the walk, and will bring her own particular lens to this conversation. And of course, we've got Heidi Pass, who recently joined the Witwa Committee. Welcome, Heidi. She's an earth scientist, absolutely passionate about gender intelligence, and again, a past Tech Plus Award nominee and role model. And some might know her from her experience through Homeward Bound. So I'm sure we can touch on that as well, because that was a significant application, I'm sure. So welcome, ladies. I'll get you all to unmute so we can have a wonderful conversation. What I'd love to do is, if people are listening in and you've had a chance to call up the workbook, you will see that we've got the resources linked in the chat channel as well. Just click on that link. You'll be able to get to it. The first question that we have for our awards is personal determination. And it is limited to 250 words. So as Sarah said, it is 250 words, not 260, because you just couldn't shave off those and therefore or whatever. And the question is how to provide evidence of how you demonstrate your ability to overcome business challenges with tenacity, determination, and grit. Now, it's a fairly broad brushed question, let's be honest. It's the same question that we've asked for the last few years. So maybe as a starting point, if I hand over to Michelle, Gree and Heidi, because you have previously answered this question, would one of you, and maybe I should nominate someone seeing that we're in the virtual world, maybe Gree, I'll pick on you first. I mean, feel free to lead in with a general perspective on how you felt when you applied and what was going on in your mind, if you can still cast your way back to that.
I can definitely cast my way back to that, because I got told to nominate and I was going, no, not me. I can't do that. But I do think this is quite important. What made me change my mind was that, number one, the lovely Kay, Deputy Chair, told me, I don't know what you've done, Gree, only you know what you've done. And the other one was that if I want to be a role model, I can't not be out there and do that. And then I saw my blueprint for backing myself online, which is Joe, doing all of this. So that was where I was coming from with it. And I think personal, you always go, oh, but I haven't really done anything. But once you start asking your friends, asking your mentors, asking your colleagues, and sort of bringing that in, you've got all this, I don't know about all this, but I have a lot of stuff written over the years. Maybe it's a sign of my age. And then you start pulling that all together, and then you start synthesizing things and making it smaller and smaller and smaller. So that was kind of I did a whole brain dump, and then I sort of put it out to other people about it, but bringing in specific examples of what I had done through the years. So that was kind of about providing the evidence and things like that. I don't know what it was like for the rest of for Michelle and Heidi.
Did you find yourself drifting to wanting to answer the technical expertise first? Is it easier to focus on the technical versus something like personal determination, overcoming challenges with tenacity, determination and grit? I mean, that very much goes to character, doesn't it, and personality?
It does, but I guess for me, because I come from a technical background, I'm trying to get myself out of it. I thought like leading with who I am was probably the easiest way, and I did have a mentor who was pushing me along, so that was quite good as well. But yeah, the technical expertise strength, I think, it's easier to provide evidence for, though, I think so.
Okay. So Michelle, did you previously apply for any awards before you went for the Witwer Award?
So yes, I have done a CME, Women in Mining sort of application, and then also a couple of scholarship applications, and then the Witwer one. But all of them excruciating to do. So don't, anyone who's feeling like that, don't think that it comes easy for any of us, I think is one thing. But like Gree, I was like, I haven't done anything super impressive or super important. So it is always a challenge, and it's always a challenge to sort of reflect inward and then think, and then to also talk outward and go, but I've done this and I've done that. I always speak we or my team when I'm speaking to anyone else. So when you have to put it in the first person, it's actually really, really hard. But in terms of my approach to the actual nomination form and answering the questions, I did, to Joe's point as well, just think about the stepping stones. So what were the real pivot points, and what made a difference to me that I felt in my career, and then started working through what did that do more broadly, and what was the value I brought to people or teams or the business and that sort of thing. So the stepping stones and the pivot points, and I think the other thing to think about as well, to your point about whether the technical is the easier question to answer, I'm not technical at all. I actually have a finance background. I now find myself as the chief advisor for information systems, and it's like, how the hell did that ever happen? So it's not all about being technical. It is about leadership, and it is about your personal journey. So I think something that I think is important is that whilst you want it to be professional, don't ever think that you have to leave out personal experiences that have shaped you and made you who you are. Somehow weave those into your story if it's appropriate, obviously in a professional way.
That's very good advice. I mean, don't self-bias, and don't take things out of the equation because you don't place as much value on them.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone else knows you like you do. And I should say that is the reason why we're having people nominate themselves and fill in the submissions, because, as much as we think we know somebody else, ultimately you are the holder of all that value, and you are the best person to put that narrative together. So Heidi, I mean,
yes.
You've been you are a Whitwell role model. You've applied for things such as Homeward Bound, which I'm sure we're highly competitive. Before we go into, the how, what was your mindset when you were applying for the Whitwell Award or the Homeward Bound Award?
Oh, okay. Mindset. It's two very different mindsets. The Homeward Bound application was enormously pivotal, and I was actually working with an executive mentor at the time, and that application in itself cracked open a whole new, I guess, chapter, if you will, for my career. And I took a lot of time to self-reflect and look back. I've been in my career is about 20 years old, and it was a pivotal time to reflect and then to turn that reflection into the application. So that I'd say that was almost a unique case, and there was some synergy about where I was in my career and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. My mindset around the Whitwell Award was different, in that I guess I did have the Homeward Bound, a successful Homeward Bound application behind me. And there were similarities in terms of the word count. And I have some practical tips that I can share around what I did for the Whitwell, capitalizing, I guess, on my learnings from some previous writings. So I think we've talked about, and Joe's referred to, the power of storytelling. And I think that it's important to say, and I think you touched on this as well, Michelle, that it's not just say like, oh, I'm really courageous, but to demonstrate in a short story that's roughly a paragraph long, how were you courageous? And there's three parts to that story particularly. There would be a turning point, which is a moment of great challenge or uncertainty. The second would be, there was a decision. You can explain your motivation for you making your decision in terms of the how, as well as the why. And then there is the result. So within, say, 250 words, you can probably allow yourself 3 or 4 paragraphs. And you can either do a short story, or you could do 2 or 3 short stories. Or you could do one longer one, depending on what you are wanting to demonstrate. But it's all about, it's turning your personal experiences, your work experience, your volunteer activities, your sporting activities, your experience as a parent, anything in life. It's about demonstrating what the question is asking for, which is the great point about what Sarah made. And I can offer too, a tip that I use is, and there's many different diagnostics out there, but one of the ones that I learned about is called format. And you can Google that. It's the number 4, and then MAT. I'm not prescribing this one. It's just saying that it's one that I use. And it's a diagnostic about how people learn. And it puts people's learning styles into 4 different quadrants. And what that means is that, so someone is going to be learning about you when you're writing your application. And some people sort of balk about, getting labeled, oh, I'm more, there's more than 4 styles, but it's just a general tool. Quadrant 1 is about the heart. They want to know the answer to why. Quadrant 2 is the analytics. They want to know the numbers. That's totally me. all about the data, and they want to know what. Quadrant 3 is around the practical application. What does it mean? What am I going to do now? They want to know the answer to how. And quadrant 4 is around what if. They're the visionaries. They're the ones that you don't take on in a game of chess. They're already 5 steps ahead. So when you're creating your story, you want to address each one of these quadrants. And it can seem a little bit overwhelming at first, but if you just think about the heart people, they don't care what you know until they know how much you care. The analytics people, throw some numbers in there, make it practical, and speak to what's happening tomorrow. So when you're doing your turning point, your decision, your motivation about the strategy, how you made that decision and why you made that decision, you're speaking into the practical nature as well as the heart of it, and then the result, the vision forward. So I think for me, I use that format when I'm speaking and creating pieces, and I can use it on the paragraph scale and repeat that, and I can also use it on the whole answer scale. And I would say that, for instance, for myself, for format, I'm very strong quadrant 2, quadrant 3. I love to know about the numbers and what are we going to do about it. So when I was doing my WITWA application, I had a good friend who was quite skilled. Now she's quite the opposite to me. She's all about the heart. She's very emotive, uses a lot of expressive language and adjectives, and she's very visionary. So I had her look over my application once I'd had given it the best go and said, you know, can you please suggest where it's sounding too analytical and too practical? Give me a bit of heart and a bit of flair, because I do have that, but that's not my natural writing style. And so together she gave me some suggestions, and it did flush it out. It made it more well-rounded. I think I also will confess to using Grammarly. It keeps me on track. I do have a paid subscription to Grammarly. It's not expensive, but even the free one is quite useful. That's a little bit of a writing hack that I use, because Grammarly, if you're not familiar with it, has analytics in it that says, you can say, well, I want to write in a persuasive style or a casual style or an informing style. And then it picks up things, just like what Sarah was saying. It picks up your grammar when you've got a run-on sentence or something's confusing. It picks up spelling. And I think they might even have a free trial for a short period. So if that's true, you could put in your best draft and then fix it according to what Grammarly says. So yeah, I think, and just remember, I think also it's important to remember that writing is a skill, right? It takes practice. You know, this is a great example, as was said before, that you can practice your writing. Joe was saying it's similar to LinkedIn. You can use this on your LinkedIn's or other bios and things like that. And every time you practice and you massage it, and it gets a little bit better. And then what I found is that eventually I have a list of stories, I have a list of bios, and when an opportunity comes up, I can just pick from those lists and I can tweak and I can come up with a product for that particular application. So practice, 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 of course, and remembering that it's a skill. And very much, I think somebody mentioned about getting, if you don't have a friend, but you have the available resources to have a professional writer or someone, I don't think that would go wrong. Communicating well and clearly is a lifelong learning skill, and you can't go wrong with that.
Absolutely. Some great practical tips in there. And it is not cheating, ladies, if you're getting other people to look at your words and to help you shape them. I think there's often a preconception that unless it comes solely out of your particular head, then somehow it's not authentic. So I've also had a question come through about the timing of the examples. So will more recent examples, let's say in the last 12 months, be scored higher than more historical examples? No, they won't. They won't. This is the celebration of the collective of you and, you know, your journey of it. It's not about you being absolutely incredible in the last 6 to 12 months and reaching the pinnacle of your success. So don't worry about when it was that you were brilliant. Just let us know the moments where you think you really showed and demonstrated that personal determination, because to Sarah's point, it's about answering that particular question. And the only other quick tip I'd throw in there, Heidi was talking about Format, which I hadn't heard about before. Sounds like a great tool. The other one, and I think it's about $20 to do, is the Gallup Strengths Finder. Again, a great, easy way to do it online and get some objective new language around where your strengths are. And to Heidi's point, repurposing it. You can repurpose this all over the place, in your CV, in your LinkedIn, in your next job interview, in your next promotion, in your next salary negotiation. So this is more than just the award. So that answered that particular question. Maybe if we can move on to the next one, which is around technical strength. And again, it is limited to 250 words, so nothing much changes there. But it's about providing evidence of how you demonstrate your ability to provide fresh, innovative approaches and push boundaries for better business outcomes. Michelle, would you care to comment on how you perhaps approached that particular question in your application?
Sure. I think a lot of the thinking around the answers is already, Heidi's given some really great tips, and I think they apply whether, no matter which one of the questions we're talking about. It's that storytelling, making sure that you've got all of those points, the decision point, the turning point, and all of that sort of thing. So I think it is, when you're talking about the technical piece, it's, and again, to Sarah's point, you answer the question, okay, it's asked how you demonstrate. So you need to tell stories and use examples and describe the value or the transformation or the change that you've made in the work that you've done. So it's just, again, applying those tips that Heidi's already talked about, I think probably within the technical lens versus the personal lens for me.
If you are not part of a big brand, I think some of us can sometimes feel a bit left out, because you go, well, I don't have a massive big brand that's well known around town that I can put in there with a very cool title that just makes me sound oh so amazing, and I've managed 30 people. Many of us are entrepreneurs, many of us work for smaller businesses or for ourselves. So perhaps I'll throw this one over to Gree, who has worked in massive big brands, but also is an entrepreneur in her own right. What do you think, how would you approach that when we talk about our strengths, but outside of that massive big corporate branding world? You're on mute, Gree, sorry. Thank you.
I do that all the time. I was thinking, right? It's a long time since I was in a big brand one, and maybe not one that I always want to be associated with anymore as well. But I think it's really about showcasing who you are and what you have done across it and how the different skills are. I guess I've spent the last 10 years, trying to get my own business off the ground, and then going back in and contracting for the bigger brands to pay my bills, that sort of stuff. But that still demonstrates technical strength. I think in today's world, being entrepreneurial or running your own business is almost is regarded just as high as the bigger brands, in my opinion, I think. But it's, again, back to what everybody's been saying. It's really about telling your story and in your words, and using the looking at how I kind of always find it's useful to try to be somebody else and look outside, look from the outside in on yourself and look at what you've done there. So I don't know if I'm really answering that question very well, because to me it's kind of the same thing. It's just who you are and what you're doing with it. So sorry,
Greg. I agree totally. I think entrepreneurial skills and everything are technical skills. So don't limit yourselves to thinking about technology as in IT technology. There are lots of skills and lots of things, even leadership within a technology team, digitalization. It doesn't have to be coding. There's lots of ways that you can show that. So I think, Greg, your message and a really key message for everyone is just don't limit your thinking. Really put yourself out there.
And the same applies for anyone listening in that may be sitting in the university environment. We've had researchers win in the past. We've got wonderful researchers on our role models page. So yet again, this is not just about industry. It is about women in those STEM fields. And you are very much part of that conversation. You bring some incredible thinking and problem solving and groundbreaking research to the table. So please don't opt out of this conversation either by saying, oh, I'm not a technologist, I sit in a university, I don't have a big team that I'm leading. We are really being very inclusive, whether it is self-employed, employed, whether you're a researcher, a consultant, whatever it may be, or teachers. We have teachers as role models as well, educators. It is a very broad bucket.
I think here it's also just really important to reiterate again that it's women in technology, all sorts of technology. It's STEM/STEAM. It's not information technology. It's not coding and computer science and things like that alone. They obviously count as well, but it is across the remit. So yeah.
And can I just add something? I was going to say this time as well, and maybe if you're not in the traditional tech space, you're using technology to do all the things that we normally do. So it might just be an innovative way of doing something. So if you step back and look at how you problem solved, there might be something there that might be worth celebrating, or something you've done that's impacted your team and how you operate.
Very good advice, and thank you, Jo, because it also links into that last question, which is the third question in the application around leadership. And leadership is all about, how are you making change happen? How do you demonstrate a different, better, smarter, more productive way of doing things? And leadership is about humans. So I think, Jo, I guess I'd like to throw over to you briefly about this question on leadership, because it's something that comes up in the LinkedIn space a lot, doesn't it, about how you demonstrate that you're a leader. What advice do you give women when you talk about, oh, I'm not a leader, I don't lead a team, I don't have a job that has a leadership title in it. How do I overcome that barrier?
It's interesting that you're asking me that question, because I certainly don't see myself as a leader at all, but I guess you have to lead yourself first. And that's something I think I've learned over the last decade or so of running my own business, that if, you've got to have the courage to step forward and give things a try and lead the way and, give other people permission to try. And sometimes they're waiting for permission. So I do a lot of social experiments, particularly on LinkedIn. Some of the stuff I do, and it's to give people permission to be themselves, or to try new things. So I'm the person at the conference that will ask the really obvious question, because I can read the room and see that people are a little bit nervous about starting. So I like to be that sort of person that asks something, because I think once we start the ball rolling, we open up the floor for everybody else. So if you can have the courage, and then I guess look at when you've had courage to do something, and it might just be something that's normal for you, that's your everyday way of doing and being, but you've stepped forward and have the courage to be vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is a big part of leadership as well, just putting yourself out there and being open to be judged or scrutinized by your decisions.
And maybe that's
I don't know. Sorry. I was going to say, can I add another piece about that with regards to the leadership is something that I've learned in the past couple of years, and 100% right, Jo, is that I look at leadership as 3 different types. You can't lead others unless you're leading yourself. So there's how have you led yourself, leadership of self. I think we often jump to thinking of leadership as leading others, and sure that is with leading a team, whether that be through volunteering or through your work, but there's also leading for the greater good. I think leading self, leading others, leading for the greater good expands perhaps a more traditional view about what people might think leadership is about.
If I could just add one thing to this conversation, I think there's also some gold in any kind of adversity that you've had to come over or overcome. And often, I think we look at things that we may consider to be a failure and say, I don't want to go anywhere near that. But as a judge in the past, I'm quite impressed by somebody that's had to come back from a bankruptcy, or had to come back from a natural disaster, or had some kind of a tragedy happen on their staff. And there can be real strength and gold for an award submission found in those kinds of adverse situations that you've handled.
Absolutely. So I'm mindful of time, and as usual with our Witwa events, we could talk for hours about this. We're very, very passionate. But one thing I do want to point out before we think about wrapping up is in the handbook, you'll also have a little how-to guide on preparing your profile. Because as I said, if you nominate or when you nominate, I hope ladies listening to us today, we will, regardless of what the outcome with the award is, your name and your blurb, so to speak, and your photo will be part of the role models page. So take control of what we put up there, please. So we've got a little template. It tells you to come up with a little headline, to give yourself a little bio. It's a very short little bio, and shows you how we're going to display your photo. May I please encourage you all to pick a professional photo that you really want up there, not that quick selfie that you took on Friday night after some drinks with the girlfriends. It's an obvious thing to say, but you know, it is about holding ourselves up in the best light. So, and if you're not quite sure what that should look like, simply jump onto the role models page. You've got over 320 different examples of how people have described their own wonderful selves. Do reiterate again that the timeline has changed. We've had requests for an extension of time. So initially we said all submissions are due on the 31st of July. We are now, and thanks to the very generous mindset of our overall committee and everyone involved, we've extended that to midnight. So that is 1 minute to midnight, if you want to be precise, Perth time, on Sunday, the 9th of August. So this gives you really 9 more days to polish your applications, to talk to yourself in the mirror in the morning and say, yes, I will do this. This is my gift to myself this year. And I will not worry ahead about what people will say of me, but rather I will back myself and I will have the courage to do this, because I promise you there is no downside to this. So as we wrap up, I'd love to have a quick whip around the virtual round table and final thoughts and messages to anyone listening today. Sarah, what would your takeaway message be to our listeners?
Get started. Just start today. And even if it's just writing down bullet points, the sooner you start, the more comfortable you'll feel by the end of the process and the more thorough that you'll be.
Thank you. Michelle, thoughts?
Be brave, put yourself out there and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Gree, what would you say to anyone listening?
Just do it and get input from people and take it on board, and we're all winners. Anybody that's on the role models page is a winner because we stand up and we are models for everybody else.
Heidi?
I guess I would have another practical tip is get together with a friend or 2 or 3 friends that know you well and just take half an hour and brainstorm stories that reflect who you are, stories about that time, remember when, oh, that was a good one, you know, things that come up that really reflect who you are and demonstrate your character, your personality, and your values. And from that collection of stories, I reckon you probably have, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 different stories, and then you can choose from there where to build your short paragraphs and your answers, and they'll feed into those different categories.
Thank you. And lastly but not least, Jo, any final takeaway thoughts?
I guess just back yourself and give yourself the gift of time to celebrate your little wins and give it a go. And another tip is read Be Brilliant. I know Janine spoke a couple of weeks ago now, but read books like that and you know, celebrate your own brilliance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've got really very little to add to those inspirational messages. Back yourself. We weren't all born natural leaders. So feel free to actually just embrace that fear and go for it. You will find a copy of this recording on our website or social media channels once we're done. So if anyone has missed out that you know about today, please feel free to share it. Remember, 9th of August, somebody has just notified me that 9th of August is actually Women's Day. So the gods are in our favor, ladies. And check out the resources. Use them. Follow them, and I promise you we're going to have a lot of fun on the 30th of October when we actually unveil who the winners are and who our role models are. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Michelle, Sarah, Gree, Heidi, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. Thank you for being brave enough to be part of the conversation. And to everyone else, start writing, start drafting, start bullet pointing, or just have some fun and relax this Sunday afternoon. So thank you all, ladies.
Bye now.
Thank you, Pia.
Bye. Happy
later.
writing. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See you.